Northwest 255 heavy, runway 3 left cleared for takeoff. The routine words crackled through the radio on that scorching August evening in Detroit, but within 90 seconds, they would become the final transmission of one of aviation's most devastating disasters. The year was 1987, and Northwest Flight 255 was about to write its name in blood across the annals of commercial aviation history. What began as an ordinary Sunday departure would end in a catastrophe so complete, so utterly devastating, that it would forever change how we think about aviation safety and the fragile line between life and death at 30,000 feet. The McDonnell Douglas MD-82 sat gleaming on the tarmac at Detroit Metropolitan Wayne County Airport, its silver fuselage catching the dying rays of the summer sun. This was no ordinary aircraft, but a sophisticated machine representing the pinnacle of 1980s aviation technology, equipped with twin Pratt and Whitney JT8D engines, capable of propelling 155 souls toward their destinations at speeds approaching 600 miles per hour. The registration N312RC had rolled off the production line just 2 years earlier, a testament to American engineering prowess and commercial aviation's relentless march toward efficiency and speed. Inside the cockpit, Captain John Mouse settled into his seat with the confidence born of 16,000 flight hours, his weathered hands moving across instruments and controls with the practiced precision of a concert pianist. At 57 years old, Mouse embodied everything passengers wanted in their pilot: experience, competence, and an unshakable calm that came from decades of navigating the complexities of commercial flight. Beside him, First Officer David Dodds represented the next generation of aviators, his 4,000 hours of flight time marking him as a skilled professional still ascending toward the peak of his career. The passenger manifest told the stories of 149 individuals whose lives had intersected on this particular Sunday evening, each carrying their own dreams, anxieties, and expectations for the journey ahead. Among them sat families returning from summer vacations, business travelers preparing for Monday morning meetings, and ordinary people whose only crime was trusting in the miracle of modern flight. In seat 8F, 4-year-old Cecilia Kitchan fidgeted beside her parents, her small hands clutching a coloring book that would soon become one of the most haunting artifacts of aviation disaster. The Kitchan family was returning to Phoenix after visiting relatives in Pennsylvania, their vacation memories still fresh as they prepared for the short flight that should have delivered them safely home within 2.5 hours. Flight attendant Roberta Rademacher moved through the cabin with professional grace, her smile masking the routine calculations every crew member makes about emergency procedures, evacuation routes, and the 1,000 small details that separate safety from catastrophe. As evening shadows lengthened across the Detroit metropolitan area, Flight 255 represented more than just another departure in the endless stream of commercial aviation. This was Northwest Orient Airlines at the height of its operational complexity, managing hundreds of flights daily across a route network that stretched from coast to coast and beyond. The airline had built its reputation on reliability and service, but like every carrier in the deregulated environment of the 1980s, Northwest faced constant pressure to maintain schedules, minimize delays, and keep passengers moving efficiently through an increasingly crowded airspace system. The MD-82 itself embodied these competing demands, offering airlines the perfect balance of passenger capacity, fuel efficiency, and operational flexibility that made it a workhorse of domestic aviation. Detroit Metropolitan Wayne County Airport buzzed with its typical Sunday evening activity as passengers hurried through terminals, ground crews serviced aircraft, and air traffic controllers managed the complex choreography of departures and arrivals. The airport served as a crucial hub in Northwest's route system, connecting passengers from across the Midwest to destinations throughout the United States and beyond. On this particular evening, weather conditions appeared nearly ideal for flying, with clear skies, light winds, and visibility stretching for miles in every direction. The temperature hovered near 90 degrees Fahrenheit, creating the kind of warm summer evening that makes air conditioning a blessing and reminds everyone why humanity invented climate-controlled cabins for commercial aircraft. Inside the cockpit of Flight 255, Captain Mouse and First Officer Dodds methodically worked through their pre-flight procedures, a ritual as familiar as breathing, but critical for ensuring every system operated within acceptable parameters. The pre-flight checklist represented decades of hard-won aviation wisdom, each item the result of lessons learned through triumph and tragedy, success and failure, survival and death. They verified fuel quantities, tested flight controls, confirmed navigation systems, and performed the hundreds of small tasks that transform a stationary machine into a vehicle capable of defying gravity. The cockpit voice recorder captured their professional exchanges, creating an audio record that would later become crucial evidence in understanding exactly what went wrong in those final moments before catastrophe struck. As passengers settled into their seats and flight attendants performed their safety demonstrations, few could have imagined they were participating in the opening scenes of one of commercial aviation's most studied disasters. The routine nature of air travel had created a complacency born of statistics showing flying remained the safest form of long-distance transportation. But statistics provide cold comfort when you become the exception rather than the rule. Children pressed their faces to windows, adults reviewed work documents or attempted to relax after long weekends, and elderly passengers reflected on family visits that had renewed their spirits and reminded them of life's simple pleasures. The ordinariness of the scene made what followed all the more shocking and incomprehensible. Ground control cleared Flight 255 to taxi toward runway 3 left, and the massive MD-82 began its slow progression through the airport's network of taxiways and holding areas. The aircraft's twin engines hummed with quiet power as they moved past other airliners preparing for their own departures, creating a familiar symphony of aviation that airport workers and frequent flyers barely noticed anymore. Captain Mouse maintained radio contact with ground controllers while First Officer Dodds monitored instruments and verified their taxi route, two professionals executing procedures they had performed thousands of times before. The setting sun painted the airport in golden hues that would soon give way to the harsh glare of emergency lights and the chaos of first responders racing toward an unthinkable scene of destruction. As Flight 255 approached runway 3 left, air traffic control provided their final clearance for takeoff, authorizing the crew to begin the sequence of events that would transform their aircraft from a ground vehicle into a flying machine capable of soaring above the earth at incredible speeds. The runway stretched before them like a concrete river leading toward the sky, its length measured in thousands of feet, but its significance measured in the dreams and hopes of everyone aboard. Captain Mouse advanced the throttles, feeling the familiar sensation of engines spooling up to takeoff power, while First Officer Dodds called out speeds and monitored engine parameters. The MD-82 gathered momentum slowly at first, then with increasing urgency as physics and engineering combined to create the miracle of flight. At precisely 8:46 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, Flight 255 began its takeoff roll with all the ceremony of countless departures that had preceded it and would follow it in the endless cycle of commercial aviation. The aircraft accelerated down runway 3 left, while passengers experienced the familiar sensation of being pressed back into their seats by forces they didn't fully understand, but had learned to trust completely. Outside their windows, the lights of Detroit flashed past with increasing speed as the MD-82 approached the critical moment when wheels would leave pavement and physics would take over completely. In the cockpit, both pilots focused intently on their instruments while the aircraft's speed increased toward the calculated velocity needed to achieve flight, but something was terribly wrong with their machine. Unknown to anyone aboard Flight 255, a series of catastrophic errors had already sealed their fate before the aircraft ever left the ground. During their pre-flight preparations, the crew had failed to properly configure the aircraft's flaps and slats, the movable surfaces that provide additional lift during takeoff and landing operations. These devices represented critical technology that allowed modern airliners to operate safely from relatively short runways while carrying maximum passenger loads. But they only worked when properly deployed and configured according to established procedures. The MD-82's sophisticated systems included multiple warnings designed to alert crews to improper configurations, but on this evening, those systems had been rendered ineffective by a combination of human error and mechanical failure that created the perfect conditions for disaster. As Flight 255 reached rotation speed and Captain Mouse pulled back on the controls to lift the aircraft's nose toward the sky, the MD-82 initially appeared to respond normally to his inputs. The main landing gear separated from runway 3 left as the aircraft achieved the basic conditions necessary for flight, But without properly configured flaps and slats, the airplane lacked sufficient lift to sustain itself in the air. For a few precious seconds, Flight 255 existed in that magical realm between Earth and sky that represents humanity's triumph over natural limitations. But physics would soon reassert its authority with devastating consequences. The aircraft managed to climb approximately 50 feet above the ground before aerodynamics and gravity combined to create an impossible situation that no amount of pilot skill could overcome. First Officer Dodds recognized something was wrong almost immediately as the aircraft's behavior became increasingly erratic and uncontrollable. His voice, captured forever on the cockpit voice recorder, reflected the growing alarm of a professional pilot who understood they were facing an emergency of unprecedented magnitude. "We're not going to make it," he stated, with the calm professionalism that marked him as a true aviator, even in the face of certain death. Captain Mouse fought desperately with the controls, trying to coax their aircraft to respond to commands that would have worked perfectly under normal circumstances, but were powerless against the fundamental aerodynamic problems they faced. The MD-82 shuddered and bucked like a wild animal as both pilots struggled to maintain control, but their fate had already been determined by events that occurred on the ground. The aircraft began to lose altitude almost immediately after achieving its maximum height of approximately 50 feet, and both pilots realized they were facing an unsurvivable situation. With insufficient airspeed to maintain flight and no runway remaining ahead of them, Flight 255 was essentially falling with forward momentum toward whatever lay beyond the airport boundary. The MD-82 struck a light pole near the end of the runway, then continued its deadly trajectory toward Middle Belt Road, where Sunday evening traffic moved normally as drivers remained completely unaware of the disaster descending upon them. The impact with the light pole damaged the aircraft further, while doing nothing to slow its forward momentum or improve its aerodynamic characteristics. Flight 255 crossed Middle Belt Road at an altitude of approximately 30 feet, its massive bulk creating a terrifying spectacle for motorists who suddenly found themselves witnesses to an aviation disaster of unprecedented magnitude. The aircraft struck several vehicles on the roadway, instantly killing occupants who had been driving home from weekend activities or preparing for another week of work and family obligations. The MD-82 continued its destructive path toward a nearby rental car facility where dozens of vehicles sat parked in neat rows, awaiting customers who would never arrive. The impact with the rental car lot created a massive fireball visible for miles as jet fuel ignited and transformed the crash site into an inferno that would burn for hours. The main wreckage of Flight 255 came to rest in flames among the destroyed rental cars, creating a scene of devastation that challenged the comprehension of even experienced emergency responders. The aircraft had essentially disintegrated on impact, with debris scattered across a wide area that included portions of the roadway, the rental car facility, and nearby buildings. The intense heat from burning jet fuel made immediate rescue attempts impossible, while creating a column of black smoke that rose high into the evening sky like a monument to the fragility of human life and the unforgiving nature of aviation disasters. Emergency vehicles raced toward the scene with sirens wailing, but their crews already understood they were responding to a tragedy rather than a rescue operation. Among the wreckage and flames, something miraculous occurred that would provide the only ray of hope in an otherwise completely devastating disaster. 4-year-old Cecilia Sichan, thrown clear of the main wreckage during the impact, lay critically injured but alive in a section of the aircraft that had broken away from the primary crash site. Her survival represented a statistical impossibility that defied every expectation about human endurance and the survivability of major aviation disasters. Rescue workers found her approximately 20 minutes after the crash, her small body bearing evidence of severe trauma, but her vital signs indicating she might survive if medical intervention arrived quickly enough. The sight of this lone survivor provided emergency responders with renewed determination as they worked to stabilize her condition and transport her to the hospital. The investigation into Flight 255 began immediately as teams from the National Transportation Safety Board descended upon Detroit to begin the painstaking process of determining exactly what had caused this devastating accident. Initial evidence pointed toward crew error in failing to properly configure the aircraft for takeoff, but investigators understood that aviation disasters rarely result from single causes and typically involve complex combinations of human factors, mechanical issues, and systemic problems that create conditions where tragedy becomes inevitable. The cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder provided crucial evidence about the final moments of Flight 255, but understanding why experienced pilots failed to detect such a fundamental configuration error would require months of detailed analysis and investigation. As news of the disaster spread across the nation and around the world, Flight 255 joined the pantheon of aviation accidents that serve as stark reminders of flying's inherent risks and the constant vigilance required to maintain safety in commercial aviation. The crash killed 154 people, making it one of the deadliest aviation disasters in United States history and the worst accident involving a McDonnell Douglas MD-82. The victims included not only the passengers and crew aboard the aircraft, but also 2 people in vehicles struck during the aircraft's final moments, creating a tragedy that extended far beyond the aviation community into the broader Detroit metropolitan area. Families across the nation found themselves thrust into grief and loss as they learned that loved ones who had called to confirm their flight arrangements would never be coming home. The sole survivor of Flight 255, Cecilia Kichan, spent months in the hospital recovering from her injuries while becoming a symbol of both tragedy and hope for people around the world. Her survival raised questions that medical experts struggled to answer, while her courage and resilience inspired millions of people who followed her recovery through extensive media coverage. The 4-year-old girl who had been traveling with her parents and brother became the public face of a disaster that claimed everyone else she knew and loved, carrying forward their memory while building a new life from the ashes of unimaginable tragedy. Her story reminded people that even in the darkest moments of human experience, life finds a way to continue, and hope refuses to be extinguished completely.
The immediate aftermath of the Flight 255 disaster prompted extensive changes in aviation safety procedures and training protocols designed to prevent similar accidents from occurring in the future. Airlines implemented enhanced checklists and verification procedures, while aircraft manufacturers developed improved warning systems that would alert crews to configuration errors before attempting takeoff.
The Federal Aviation Administration revised training requirements and mandated new procedures for ensuring that all critical systems are properly configured before flight operations begin. These changes represented the aviation industry's commitment to learning from tragedy and using hard-won lessons to protect future passengers and crew members. The investigation ultimately determined that Flight 255 crashed because the aircraft was not properly configured for takeoff, specifically because the flaps and slats were not extended to their required positions. This configuration error should have triggered multiple warnings that would have alerted the crew to the problem, but a blown fuse had disabled the takeoff warning system, creating a situation where normal safety procedures failed to function as designed. The crew's failure to detect the configuration error during their pre-flight checks represented a human factors failure that highlighted the importance of proper training, standardized procedures, and effective communication in preventing aviation accidents. The tragedy demonstrated how seemingly minor oversights can cascade into catastrophic consequences when multiple safety systems fail simultaneously. Boeing, which had acquired McDonnell Douglas, implemented design changes to improve the reliability and effectiveness of configuration warning systems, while airlines enhanced their training programs to emphasize the critical importance of proper pre-flight procedures. The lessons learned from Flight 255 contributed to broader improvements in aviation safety that helped prevent similar accidents and saved countless lives in subsequent decades. The crash became a case study in aviation safety courses around the world, ensuring that future generations of pilots, mechanics, and air traffic controllers would understand the importance of vigilance, communication, and adherence to established procedures in maintaining the safety of commercial flight operations. For the families and friends of Flight 255's victims, the technical explanations and safety improvements provided little comfort in the face of their overwhelming loss and grief. Parents who had kissed their children goodbye for what they expected to be brief business trips found themselves planning funerals instead of homecoming celebrations. Children lost parents, spouses became widows and widowers, and entire families were wiped out in an instant, leaving behind communities of people struggling to make sense of senseless tragedy. The randomness of the disaster made it particularly difficult to accept. as there was no way for passengers to have known about the configuration error or taken any action to protect themselves from the consequences. Memorial services held in the days and weeks following the crash brought together thousands of people who sought comfort in shared grief and collective remembrance of lives cut short by circumstances beyond anyone's control. The victims of Flight 255 included people from all walks of life: teachers and students, business executives and factory workers, grandparents and grandchildren, each with their own stories, dreams, and contributions to make to the world. Their deaths represented not only personal tragedies for their families and friends, but also a collective loss for society as a whole, as their talents, perspectives, and potential contributions would never be realized. The memorial services provided opportunities for people to honor their memories while beginning the long process of healing and moving forward. The city of Detroit, already facing economic challenges and population decline, found itself confronting an aviation disaster that brought unwanted national attention while highlighting the community's resilience in the face of tragedy. Local hospitals, emergency responders, and support organizations worked tirelessly to provide assistance to victims' families while managing the logistics of dealing with such a large-scale disaster. The crash occurred in a working-class neighborhood, where residents opened their homes and hearts to provide comfort and support to anyone who needed help, demonstrating the power of human compassion in the darkest of circumstances. The community's response to Flight 255 became part of Detroit's story of survival and solidarity during difficult times. As investigators continued their work and families began to process their grief, questions arose about whether the Flight 255 disaster could have been prevented through different procedures, better training, or improved technology. The aviation industry's response demonstrated a commitment to learning from the tragedy, while acknowledging that flying, despite its remarkable safety record, would always involve some degree of risk. The challenge facing airlines, regulators, and aircraft manufacturers was to minimize that risk through continuous improvement while maintaining the efficiency and accessibility that made air travel an essential part of modern life. The lessons learned from Flight 255 contributed to this ongoing effort, while serving as a reminder that safety must always remain the highest priority in aviation operations. The National Transportation Safety Board's final report on Flight 255 provided a comprehensive analysis of the factors that contributed to the crash while offering recommendations designed to prevent similar accidents in the future. The report emphasized the importance of proper crew training, effective communication, reliable warning systems, and adherence to established procedures in maintaining aviation safety. It also highlighted the need for continuous vigilance in identifying and addressing potential safety hazards before they can contribute to accidents. The NTSB's work on Flight 255 exemplified the organization's commitment to thorough investigation and evidence-based recommendations that have helped make flying safer for millions of passengers around the world. Today, more than 3 decades after Flight 255 crashed on that summer evening in Detroit, the aviation industry continues to benefit from the safety improvements that resulted from this tragedy. Modern aircraft are equipped with more sophisticated warning systems, crews receive enhanced training in human factors and error prevention, and airlines have implemented improved procedures for ensuring proper aircraft configuration before takeoff. These changes have contributed to a remarkable improvement in aviation safety statistics, with commercial flying becoming statistically safer than ever before. The victims of Flight 255 did not die in vain if their tragedy helped prevent future accidents and saved the lives of other passengers and crew members. The story of Flight 255 serves as a powerful reminder that safety in aviation requires constant attention, continuous improvement, and unwavering commitment to learning from both successes and failures. Every person who flies today benefits from the lessons learned through tragedies like this one, as the aviation industry has demonstrated its ability to transform disaster into knowledge and death into life-saving improvements. The memories of Captain John Mouse, First Officer David Dodds, the flight attendants who died serving their passengers, and the 149 people who trusted in the promise of safe air travel, deserve to be honored through our continued commitment to making flying as safe as humanly possible. If this story has touched you, if you have been moved by the courage of those who died and the resilience of those who survived, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing these important stories that honor the memories of those we have lost while educating current and future generations about the lessons learned through tragedy and triumph in aviation history. Share this video with others who might benefit from understanding how the aviation industry learns from its mistakes and transforms grief into progress, ensuring that the victims of disasters like Flight 255 are never forgotten, and their deaths contribute to the safety of everyone who flies today.